Hi everyone, my name is Ramon de la Fuente and this is my talk, Ethics by Example. Now in this talk, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and you can answer these questions for yourself. Just follow the instructions in the chat and you should be fine. Now let's begin with a sample statement. Technology is neutral. Now you're either in agreement with this and you could say yes, it's people who do good or evil things with technology, or no, technology changes the way people behave. So let's get started. Imagine this. You are a space pilot and while cruising through space, while making a, let's say, sharp right turn, you find a mining vessel in your way. Now, this mining vessel, you're going to hit this mining vessel, you're going to kill the crew, unless you take immediate action. Now, if you do take action, you're going to not hit this crew, but you're going to hit this other astronaut who was just out for a spacewalk. Now, do you stay on course and kill the 5 miners? Or do you alter course and kill that single astronaut? Some of you might have recognized this as the trolley problem. Now in ethics, the trolley problem is an ethical dilemma. It's a problem without a simple solution. You have to choose what you think is the right thing to do. And in its original form, it was about a trolley that was barreling down the tracks with no brakes, and it was about to hit 5 people who were working on the tracks. But you were there and you had the opportunity to flip a switch, in which case the trolley would be diverted to another track and hit a single person. Now, when first posed, most people who respond to this question for the first time, they tend to flip that switch. But why? Is it because 5 people are more important than 1, or well, it's an interesting question. Then when you change the question, it becomes different. For example, let's say that single person on the track, what if that's your child? Would you still flip that switch? Now, it's very much an emotional question. What if the 5 people that you were going to save by flipping the switch, what if they're really, really old and that single person is just a baby with its whole life ahead of it? But then what if one of those 5 old people is about to find a cure for cancer? Or that cute little baby turns out to be baby Hitler? Now, depending on what way you look at the problem, in the first sense, you probably would say 5 people or more than 1. That's called consequentialism. It's a way of looking at the consequence, like the end result of your action. But in a different question posed in a trolley problem, they would say you can stop the trolley by pushing someone onto the tracks, thereby stopping the trolley and saving 5 people. Now, if you push 5 people on the tracks, you are actively killing someone. And then most people would not flip the switch. That's most likely because it feels more like it's not your duty to intervene here and kill the single person. Who are you to make that choice? And sometimes doing things based on a sense of duty or not doing something is the ethical thing. Well, in our example, was it your duty to take action and change course as a pilot? Imagine this. You're a space pilot and you make a sharp right turn and you find a mining vessel in your way. You're going to hit this vessel and kill its crew unless you take immediate action. But if you do, you're going to hit this other astronaut who was just out for a spacewalk. Now, this time, your ship is equipped with a magic button. And you don't know exactly what the magic button does, but the manual says it engages an algorithm that will make a choice based on the best possible outcome. Do you stay on course and kill the 5 miners? Or do you engage the magic with an uncertain outcome? As people, humans, learned to live together in larger and larger groups, there was a need for rules, more and more rules. You can find those rules in the oldest text that we have. All religions have mandates of what you can and cannot do, like the 10 Commandments, for example. Law has evolved as a set of rules that we must all adhere to, as a framework for us to be able to live together. But even simpler, less enforced social rules are also an example of this. Now, in order for that system to work, you need to have accountability. You need to be able to point at someone and say, you are responsible for that decision or that outcome. And we have only ever given that accountability to humans. I mean, humans are the ones that make decisions. And so if a human was involved, then there was a decision that had to be a human decision. So in our scenario, who is responsible for the outcome? Are you responsible as a pilot for pressing the button? Or is the designer of the algorithm somehow still involved, even though she's not there? Or the manufacturer of the spacecraft, maybe, for building that algorithm into the ship? Do you have a responsibility to alter your course?
Yes. So in the first situation, I'm just traveling, I'm making a sharp turn, and I head towards 5 construction workers or miners, and I can either run into them.
You kill 5 or you kill 1?
I kill 5 or I kill 1.
You're the pilot.
I would say you want to alter course to just kill 1. That sounds
and
to me,
it's
your responsibility because you are the person traveling there. It's your responsibility to make that choice.
Like I said silently before, it sounds perfectly reasonable to me. How do you feel about the second scenario?
Yeah, so the second scenario is a bit harder because then you have to trust that there is a system in place that makes the hard decision for you, and you have to trust that system to make the right choice.
Well, the manual says it's going to make the right choice. So.
The manual says it's going to make the right choice. I'm guessing that it makes sense to trust the system. But I'm going to say that with the extra remark that I would have to have done some research into the process of building this system to make sure that I really, really trust the system to make the right decision.
Okay. Do you do that type of research now for autonomous cars?
If I were to buy an autonomous car, I would definitely do that research.
Right.
Because it's... I cannot... You know, I work in tech, so I know how tech works, which means that I don't always trust tech. And so, yes, I definitely, if I were to buy an autonomous car at this point, I would definitely research a lot.
All right. Well, yeah, this is a field where developers are actively working on this problem. Like, what decisions do we have to build into the system? We go to the next clip.
Let's go to the next.
So imagine this. You're a space pilot. You make a sharp right turn and you find a mining vessel in your way. You're going to hit and kill its crew unless you take immediate action. Now your ship, just as before, is equipped with the magic button. Only this time you know that one of the options of the magic button is to self-destruct. Now, if the choice is to self-destruct, you die and everybody else lives. Do you stay on course and kill the 5 miners? Or do you engage the magic with an uncertain outcome, potentially including your own demise? We started the presentation with the question or the statement that technology is neutral. And I think intuitively we want to answer this question with yes. Because we use things and the tools don't use us. And humans make decisions and things don't. And that's called instrumentalism. And a big example of this is always a gun. You have a gun. A gun doesn't kill anyone. You need someone to pull the trigger. Now, lately there have been different views on this, where Don Idy, for example, says that having a gun changes you. It changes your behavior. It influences you. I mean, how would you behave if you were threatened with a gun? Or if you had a gun while you were threatened, for example, or compared to when you didn't have a gun? Would you feel different? Would you be different? Would you see the world in a different way? So is technology really neutral? And how can we trust it so completely that we press a button that potentially self-destructs?
Right.
You were talking about trusting the system.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So the big question here is what is the right decision? See, to me, if I were to be the pilot of a spaceship and I would take a sharp turn and go towards, innocent bystanders, and it was my fault because I was speeding. I don't know. I had warp 9 where I could only fly warp 4. Then it would be my fault, right? So it makes more sense to trust the system, even if the system has one of the options being self-destruct, because it would be my fault.
Right, you were speeding, so self-destruct.
I was speeding,
yeah.
So self-destruct, the person that is causing the problem is the person being punished for causing the problem.
Right.
Now, if our miners there were not supposed to be there, because they're on a highway, and I'm just doing whatever I'm doing on a highway, being, going warp 9, then it's a different thing. But still, the question is then, do I trust the system to say, well, they were not supposed to be there?
Right. So in this case, you have the option to turn on the system.
Yeah.
So it's not a system that's always there.
No.
You choose to engage it or not.
Yes.
That's your decision.
But then I have to make a split-second decision on whether or not it was my fault that something is about to happen.
Yeah. And one of the problems with the trolley problem itself is that you can answer a certain way and say, I would do that. But is that actually what you're going to do when you're in that situation?
Yes. Well, it's all theoretical, of course, but this is how I'm thinking about it right now while we're not sitting in a spaceship going towards a group of miners. We're sitting here.
Well, we could stop killing miners and go to the next clip.
Let's do that. Let's see what happens.
Imagine this. You're a space pilot. On your travels, you find a lovely inhabited planet and you decide to go in for a visit. So you land the ship, and while you're there, you get this weird sensation. You realize that you can read minds, the minds of the aliens, and you don't really get individual thoughts of these aliens, but you get a general sense of their well-being. And more specifically, you can predict when they are contemplating either self-harm or harming others. Do you learn to meditate to silence your ability? Or do you attempt to help the ones you feel are in trouble? Fans of Star Trek probably know about the Prime Directive. It's the most important rule in space travel. No Starfleet personnel may interfere with the normal and healthy development of alien life and culture. It's more important than your mission, your ship, or even your life. Now, why is this such an important rule? Well, I think that from our history, we've seen that when we start imposing better values on others, this leads to oppression and war. But does that mean that the duty to do the right thing might mean the duty to do nothing? What if you can reduce harm? Immanuel Kant wrote that for an ethical system to work, it needs to start off with the will to do the right thing. And it needs the autonomy of everyone, the autonomy of others. You can't just choose for others. They need to make their own choice. But it's also a system where it can only work if that system, if any rule that's in the system would apply to everyone. So don't treat others like you wouldn't want to be treated. So here in our example, is it our responsibility to reduce harm on this planet? Or is it our duty not to interfere, to respect autonomy? Welcome back.
You're making this really, really hard now.
I'm not making anything. No, so tell me what you think.
So, being a big Star Trek fan, I would have to trust in the Prime Directive, being that you shouldn't interfere, at least up until a certain point, of course.
Interesting.
Yes.
We may or may not have to talk about that at a certain point. At some point.
At some point, yes, exactly. The reason why I'm saying that is that, if I remember correctly, Prime Directive is mostly about societies where that have not made first contact. So where your interference would actually change the development of that specific society, where they would not be able to make the choice because they would not reach out to you first.
Right.
But the decision is hard, of course, because you can actually help people prevent harm. But yeah, this is not easy stuff.
Oh, there's more where this came from.
Oh, of course.
Do you want the next one?
Yes, let's go.
Now imagine this. You're a space pilot and you're still on their planet. You realize after a while it's not just reading minds. It's not a one-way ability. You have the option to filter certain thoughts from their minds before they reach consciousness. And they don't really notice that you're doing this. You're pretty much invisible. And if you do this, it means that they turn into a more happy bunch of aliens. So do you learn to meditate to silence your ability? Or do you attempt to lift the spirits of this entire planet? As humans learned to live together in larger and larger groups, there was a need for more and more communication. Now, information flows in a group, between groups, and now between huge numbers of people, mostly people that you don't know when you're communicating to them. And as that started to happen, there was a realization that these information flows, they need to be regulated, or there need to be rules about them, because they have the opportunity to cause large groups of people harm. So especially the ethics of mass media and journalism in particular, the rules are that they need to bring us impartial news, objectively. It needs to be balanced and free of bias, or at least open and honest about bias. It needs to respect privacy, and it must be in the public interest. Now, this last one is very interesting to me, because if it's in the public interest, then it implies a responsibility to society as a whole, or maybe humanity as a whole. Now, these information flows, they're ever changing, ever growing, and are social networks a new form of information flow? Well, they certainly are a new form of information flow, but should they fall under the same rules? In our example, you have the option to change the flow of information to reduce negative effects. Should you? Should you try to achieve that?
Yes.
What changed? What's different?
So the example of the planets, where you can change their minds without them noticing it. I think that would not be a good idea, because they don't have a choice in it. And there's also something to be said about sometimes going through hard times, right? Because you learn, I mean, developing software would not be as much fun if there was no challenge and if there were no mistakes.
True. You can't really stop all the mistakes or all the hurt, but
exactly.
You in this case, you can filter some stuff. Like, you make sort of a choice what gets through and what doesn't. So you can just say, okay, the bugs are fine. Let them work on those. Yeah. But truly negative thoughts, you could stop those.
But, yes, but still, so there's always the question, you know, can you know what happiness is if you don't also know what it is to be unhappy? So if you filter the negative thoughts without them knowing and consenting to you doing that, how could you be the judge of what is positive or negative for someone else?
Right.
So
we shouldn't be touching these information flows.
I don't think so. I don't think so. At least, so there's a difference, of course. I mean, you mentioned several different types of information flows, where media, like newspapers, TV news, stuff like that, is, for some reason, still widely regarded as impartial. Well, of course, it depends on which which TV station or which newspaper, but it is still widely regarded as impartial, whereas social media, if you go on Twitter, you already know that everyone is posting from their own bubble, from their own mindset, from their own, social structure and things like that.
But there's filtering going on there as well. You don't have any influence in that, so that's not you are not consenting to the filtering.
No, but it's happening.
The knowing is enough. So if they would know about you filtering, that would be fine on this platform.
Well, so signing up for Twitter, you agree that you will be part of their platform, and
right.
As a platform, they set the rules.
Okay.
Whereas in the original example, they don't sign up for you interfering with their thoughts. So I think that's probably the difference. It's the fact that you consciously choose to participate in a certain information flow.
Okay. Makes sense. Next clip. Now imagine this. You're a space pilot and you're still on their planet. And after a while you've researched their history and you've come to realize that they weren't always such an evil, negative bunch. They weren't always so war hungry. Before you arrived, they were actually quite mellow. Now, this comes at a great shock to you because you weren't here before to see the difference. So, and now that you're here, you don't have an option to change because you're already here and you can't rewind a movie when you're already in it. So, do you learn to meditate to ignore the problem? Or do you try to repair the damage by filtering even harder? Technology has changed how we live. It's been changing how we live forever. And it also changes the way we view the world. So, for example, a car, the invention of the car, changed the way we organize our lives. We can live further away from where we work. But the invention of air travel not only does that, but it also changes your perception of the size of the globe, maybe. In the theory of technological mediation, there are 4 levels at which this happens. This technology being an influence on how we live, but also how we see the world. Technology can be in the background, maybe like your heating system in your house, where it's always there, slightly changing your environment, but you don't actively think about it, unless it's broken. That's when it calls your attention. Some technology is meant to be interacted with. So maybe the dishwasher, where you load it and you get clean dishes from it. Some technology is meant to be read, not looking at the technology itself, but kind of looking at some other information that it's conveying. For example, a clock. The clock on your wall is not something you look at to see the clock, unless you have a particularly nice clock. You look at it to see the time, which is a whole new dimension. A 4th level at which technology has this role is when it's embodied. It enhances an aspect of you. For example, a hammer, you don't really think about the hammer, but it's an extension of your arm giving you more power. Or my glasses, for example, where I get to read number plates in the distance again. I don't really think about the glasses, I just look through them, but they're there. Now, by this theory, technology is always there, always shaping the way we see the world, do we have a responsibility to get actively engaged in the shaping that it's doing? Professor Peter Paul Verbeek, who teaches mediation theory, says that the act of designing technology is in fact doing ethics by other means. Now, in our example, now that you know about the negative effects that you're causing, should you try to change it? Should you, with new knowledge, try to shape the way you are affecting these aliens? So,
I think in this situation, I again come back to my earlier statement about choice. Looking at our world and how technology has changed our lives, I think we, as human beings on this planet, have a responsibility towards the effects that whatever we thought of is having on the world around us.
right.
Just as an example, I'm not flying as much anymore as I used to after learning more about the harmful effects of, the flying. I currently drive a hybrid car and will be moving to full electrical as soon as I can. But it's an active choice, of course, for me to make that decision and start doing that. I think we have a responsibility to do that, to use the technology that we created ourselves. Well, not just ourselves, of course, the people before us as well, but use that technology, but in a responsible way.
Right. So in this case, I think you discovered that you had a negative effect
Yes.
that you didn't realize was there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there is a technology, it already exists. You thought it was a good thing, or you thought it was neutral, and it turns out it's not. Now this is your invention,
Yes.
or your platform.
Yeah.
Do you have a responsibility to change your platform to what you think is a better thing?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Of course, if it's my platform, I will decide on what I think is best, which may not be the same thing as other people. I mean, we can criticize Twitter for their decisions on who they block from their platform and who they allow on their platform, but it's their decision to block or allow whoever they want to, even if we don't agree with certain ideas, ideologies, practices. If we really, really don't like it, we just leave the platform.
Right.
However, if we don't like it and we feel really strongly about it, we can try to educate whoever runs the platform to convince them of our ideas.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to do that, as long as you're not, forcing it upon people.
No, because then you would be on the wrong side again.
Then you would be on the wrong side, according to me, because I am a very pacifistic person. I don't like violence. So according to me, it would be wrong.
No, but there are other ways of forcing. I
Yes.
mean, passing a law would be forcing as well.
Yes.
So that is a way of us as a group to say that certain things are not okay.
Yeah.
And that's the way we've been organizing that so far.
Yeah.
You want the next one?
Let's go.
Now imagine this. You're still on their planet, and now you want to leave. But you realize, your fuel tank is empty. And with all the meditating that you've been doing or helping people, you haven't had the chance to make any money, and fuel's expensive. So now you need to make some money. You look into how you could, and you still have your ability, of course, and you realize while researching that mind control isn't actually illegal on the planet that you're on. So do you provide your services to the highest bidder to win elections? Or do you play targeted ads in people's minds in exchange for money? As we've seen, people are responsible. But can we say that there is a responsibility beyond individual humans? Is there responsibility for companies, for example? Now we have the law, and the law is a set of rules that we all need to apply and live by, and companies need to adhere to the law too. And the law is itself an ethical framework. It's a rule-based ethical framework that needs to apply to everyone equally. Now, that also makes it a little bit of a problematic framework because it's kind of the minimum level that you can achieve. It's the level where you say, hey, if you drop below this point, as a group, we feel that you need punishment because this is not okay to us. That also means that it's always lagging behind new developments. You could say there's a gray area ahead of the law that's not illegal, but it's not ethical. And maybe sometimes the other way around as well. If you have, it's a cultural shift also that makes these laws, right? So we make these laws together. So for example, it might have been illegal for two people of the same sex to get married, but while that was still illegal, we all feel that's not ethical. We don't all feel this. I hope one day we will. But the law it's not up to date, so to speak. And because these rules need to apply to everyone equally, these laws come into being slowly. So we say there's a corporate responsibility. The law is like the minimum level. Is there another level? What are the levels of corporate responsibility? And you could say there's a range, and it starts with an economic responsibility. A company must make money. And it must make money to stay in business. Because if you lose money, then at some point it's going to stop. So if your only responsibility is to make money and maximize profits, then that might be a problematic ethical rule. Well, it's not really an ethical rule. But it's a problematic place to be in, because if you maximize profits, you're going to do this at some point to the detriment of others. You're going to cause harm. So if you are able to evade taxes in all the countries that you do business in, then as a company, you're causing harm. All the larger companies are doing this. It's not illegal, but it's not ethical. It's not illegal yet, maybe. Going up the scale, if you have this economic responsibility and you start taking more and more responsibility, if you go all the way to the other end, you could say that you could have a company founded on activism. Now, an example of this would be the vegetarian butcher. The vegetarian butcher here in the Netherlands is a company that started basically with a premise of people shouldn't eat meat. And then built a company from, okay, given that, how are we going to achieve this and be profitable? So yeah, that's the responsibility those are responsibility levels that you can have in a corporation. And you could look at your own corporation or the company that you own and say, hey, where do I feel that my company should be? But beyond individual humans and corporations, is there something to be said for professional responsibility? Is there a responsibility that we can have as humans, individuals, but in our profession? Now, we could first look at the word profession and try to define it. Because in my time, I think professional just meant you had a job. But a little longer ago, a professional was someone who has specialized knowledge that lay people wouldn't have. So a study of something. And I'd say there was the potential to do harm. So if you're a professional, you have specialized knowledge that others don't have, and you can do harm by not applying this in an ethical way. And doctors are an example of this. Doctors take an oath to do no harm. When you go to the doctor, you expect her to give you the best treatment that she knows how to. And you also expect her to keep up to date with newer treatments, maybe. Doctors actually have to take an oath before they become doctors to stick to that principle, to do no harm. And if they do, there is a board, an ethical board that can kick you out of the job. Now, if we say that specialized knowledge and the means to do harm are a definition for professionalism or for being a professional, I kind of feel that that includes us as IT specialists. Now, we're not all in a position to influence billions, maybe, but the general principle still applies. So the Australian Computer Society has written a code of ethics to keep people in the IT business bound by this oath, you could say. And it's not as strong as in the medical profession, because you're not required to have this oath and work in IT. You are also, nobody can kick you out, but it's required for the membership of the Australian Computer Society, and I like it for that reason. And the ethical rules are, it starts with the primacy of public interest. This means you don't do things that hurt society at large. You improve the quality of life with your work. That should be a core value. That should be something that you aim for. You should be honest. You should be competent. You should invest in professional development, so keep up with new technologies. And you should be professional. Now, what does this mean for us now in our day-to-day work? Let's look at some examples from the wild. Right, probably a lot to unpack there, because it was a long segment.
It was a long segment that ended quite abruptly.
Yeah, it's an invitation. I think the ending there is looking at examples in the wild.
Right.
It's an open invitation to discussion. Let's say the question to you is, what's the most unethical thing you were ever asked to build?
I think that would be a piece of software that scraped all the odds of different betting websites, that put them all together, and then based on that would make decisions on what the user should be betting on and on which betting website the best odds were given for that specific result. That was, So this is the most important one in this situation is, it is maybe slightly unethical to do it like that, but my personal opinion is that all those betting websites aren't the most ethical organizations there are in the world either.
It's a good principle to live by. Do it to them before they do it to you.
It's like, and the information is out there. The only thing that this system was supposed to be doing was gather all the information. I mean, people could do that manually with a spreadsheet as well.
Yeah.
The only thing was that this system was supposed to be automating it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably. I think maybe I'm lucky that I haven't had that many unethical requests. But then the next question is it all just about the ethical? Is it all about the project that you're working on or the system that you're building on? Because I've struggled a lot with one of my customers, which was a major customer for us for a couple of years, but they're in the air travel industry.
Yeah.
Now the project itself was not an unethical project, but by doing that project, I was working for an organization that I, on a personal level, completely disagree with how they do their business.
You were actively keeping the system alive.
Yes, exactly.
That's an ethical dilemma.
That's a very hard ethical dilemma, and one that I really, really struggled with for a very long time.
So, do you think that we need a code of ethics in our profession?
Yes and no. I think the idea behind the code of ethics is great. The problem is that the way I look at things will not be the same way as you look at things, will not be the same way as any other developer would look at things. So where I personally struggled a lot with working for a company in the air travel industry, other people would have no issues with it. So what help would some kind of ethical guidelines be if everyone's viewpoint on what is good and what is bad is different?
Right. So you're saying it's not as clear-cut as the medical profession, where the code of ethics really is a guideline. You don't do harm.
Yes, but even there, I think things can be different for different people, because medical ethics is not easy either.
None of it is easy. That's the point.
That's of course. But so if an 80-year-old patient comes in and is really, really sick, and it's gonna cost us a couple of million euros to make sure that person is healthy again, and at the same time a 10-year-old person comes in and is also really, really sick, but you only have so much money, Who
do you save?
Who do you save?
Yeah.
One doctor would immediately go for saving the person, the young person, and the other doctor might make a different decision.
Right.
So even within an ethical oath for medical personnel, the ethics of medicine in general is not easy either.
True, but it does give them sort of a there's a force there, and you can be out of a job and out of your profession if you don't stick to what, let's say, the larger group would consider ethical. In this case, it's a panel, or I don't know how they arrange that, but there is some form of, let's say, pushback if you don't stick to the rules. The other way around as well. If you work for Facebook, for example, someone had some evidence, an employee had some evidence of some decisions they were making on a management level, and he brought that information out and got fired. And probably there's going to be some legal action against him as well. There is no protection, but a code of ethics, and the code of ethics that there is right now, it has no teeth whatsoever, but a code of ethics where you could say, okay, I'm not building this because ethics, like this is the list of rules, and
Yes.
this is not okay.
But still, it would be a personal decision, because what you think is not okay to be built, probably there's going to be another developer that's going to be fine with it. And that's the problem with ethics versus the law, of course. If and you know, the software developers at Volkswagen that built all the software that would
They
interfere with the they misled the that goes against actual law. So there, the software developers should have already said, you know, what you're asking us to build right now, it's against the law, I'm not going to build it.
Yeah.
Whereas if there was no law against it, but it was just unethical, that would be a completely different thing, of course. Because then it's up to the software developer to say, am I okay with this? Or am I not okay with this?
How does it become a law?
That's what we as a society, you know, we vote for, at least we in the democratic world,
Right,
we
yeah.
vote for the people who lead us, and they make the laws based on what we think, you know, sort of what we think is okay, and is not okay.
But you believe it's a shifting thing, and that the law, because it doesn't exist, doesn't mean the law doesn't exist yet, maybe.
Yeah.
So you can't wait for it to be a law before you can open your mouth. You open your mouth before it becomes a law to make it a law.
Yeah, but I think that the difference, I guess, is where when it's unethical to do it, you can only decide for yourself whether or not you want to work on it. And if you decide I'm not okay with this, you probably have to quit your job or ask for a transfer to a different project, or you know, you have to do something about it for yourself. Whereas if it is actually against the law, then you can make the decision not just to not work on it, but you can actively work on stopping the project, because you can, you know, report it to the government, to the police,
right.
Whatever organization is responsible for.
But you don't feel that a code of ethics would be, let's say, a first step into that area, where you could say, hey, I'd like to, you know, see what my peers feel about this thing, this development.
Again, I think the idea behind a code of ethics is interesting. I wonder if implementing a code of ethics would actually change anything,
Right.
because ethics is in the eye of the beholder.
Right. It makes sense. I do have a clip of the most unethical thing I was asked to build. We can show that now.
Okay.
I have two short clips with examples from the wild, and then we can finish up.
Yeah.
I was actually asked to build this one. This is a Windows screen. What I was supposed to build was a lookalike that was just HTML as a pop-up above your current window that looked like a Windows question giving consent for something or other. But instead of having yes and no, the buttons would say yes and now. This is not okay. In Florida, during COVID-19, there was a dashboard being made by the state of Florida. And one of the engineers was asked to change the data to make the state or the policies of the state look better. And she was called Rebecca Jones, and she was fired for not changing the data. This is not okay. Yeah, there's a bunch more examples. I mean, ethics it sounded to me when I started looking into it as something really distant, right? Dead people talk. But the deeper you dig, the shiftier the sand gets. It's such a broad topic. I mean, I've put a lot into into this talk, there's autonomous vehicles. There is, you know, what negative effects certain platforms are having on people. Should we be doing something about that?
Yeah.
Should we, as a profession, have something to say? Where does corporate responsibility start and end? It's massive, but it's also it's everywhere and it's every day, and you know, you make these decisions. So yeah, how did you like the entire thing?
So it's, ethics is a very interesting food for thought. But, you know, I was not prepared for the specific dilemmas, so it feels very much, it feels very uncomfortable to have to respond immediately, because usually these kinds of dilemmas is stuff that you have to think about for a while. Now, I've tried to respond anyway.
Yeah, you did really well.
But I think the reason why I was able to do that is because I think about stuff like this a lot. As I mentioned, there was the one customer we had. I really struggled with that for a very long time.
Yeah.
So but it's stuff that we should be thinking about. Maybe more than some people are doing at the moment.
Well, for me, I think the biggest surprise I had when I started on this is that technology is neutral. I never gave the question much thought. I mean, it was, yeah, of course, because, you know, humans and objects. And
Yeah.
so actually digging into it, and mediation theory was very interesting. It gives you a different perspective. And yeah, if you're interested of learning more about mediation theory, I'll put some links in the Discord after we're done.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was.
That's
for
it.
me, yeah, such a huge topic. I have no idea. I had no idea where to cut things off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope there's something left. I have one last clip.
One last clip. Okay.
I sincerely hope that you leave my talk and start or already do the right thing, even though I haven't actually told you what the right thing is. And I don't even know. So with that, I leave you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon.
No worries.
It was very interesting, and I would invite everyone to discuss a bit more about ethics in the channel in our Discord.
I saw some stuff. I'm gonna read it all.